Brushy Mountain Penitentiary is not just an old prison in Tennessee. It stands as a symbol of brutality, mystery, and unbelievable stories about torture methods, the people living through this earthly hell, and a dark history spanning almost a century. The story begins in the early 20th century, a time when America was rapidly industrializing and urbanizing, accompanied by a surge in crime and social unrest. The Tennessee state government decided to build a prison to hold the most dangerous criminals, aiming to protect society from these increasing threats. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, Brushy Mountain was constructed with a maximum security design, thick stone walls, heavy iron doors, and one of the strictest management systems of its time. This prison was more than just a holding place. It was a symbol of harshness, designed to inflict physical and mental torment on its inmates. From its first day of operation, Brushy Mountain became a nightmare for the convicted. Prisoners were confined in dark, cramped cells with little light or air. Many could not endure the cruelty of the guards, brutal beatings, savage physical torture, all kept hidden from the public eye. But the most terrifying part was the emergence of the tiger cage, a special area in the prison where the harshest punishments and tortures were inflicted. It was called the hell beneath the earth for its cruelty, coldness, and utter hopelessness. Here, inmates were locked in tiny iron cages, so small they couldn't stand upright or lie down fully. The time spent inside could stretch for weeks or even months, destroying both body and mind. Horrifying tales of screams, the banging of iron doors, and wounds that never healed have been passed down for decades. From its very first years, Brushy Mountain was far from an ordinary prison. Inmates recounted living under extremely harsh conditions, where the line between life and death was just a step away. Winters in the Appalachian Mountains were bone-chilling, and the thick stone walls were not enough to keep the cold at bay. Prisoners in the tiger cage had no warm clothing, only worn-out, basic prison uniforms. They endured long, cold nights in isolation, loneliness, and despair. Some said the wind howling through the cracks in the stone walls sounded like the anguished cries of the prisoners themselves. Meanwhile, the guards at Brushy Mountain were rigorously trained to maintain order at all costs. Violence was the primary means of control, and any sign of rebellion or disobedience was mercilessly punished. Especially those sent to the tiger cage were virtually cut off from the outside world and even from other inmates. They were locked in tiny iron cages, barely enough room to stand or sit. Unable to lie down comfortably, their hands and feet were shackled, making them feel like caged beasts. One of the most famous stories about the tiger cage involves prisoner Robert Brushy Brown, after whom the prison was named. Brown was a well-known inmate who claimed to have killed Billy the Kid, one of the most notorious outlaws in the American West. Although Brown's story remains controversial, no one can deny his influence at Brushy Mountain. Brown endured many years under the harshest prison conditions, including time in the tiger cage. But he also witnessed and recounted horrifying tales of cruelty and torture methods that no inmate wished to remember. Living inside the tiger cage was not simply imprisonment, it was an experience many called hell on earth every day. Inmates were treated like abandoned animals, stripped of all human rights. No one was allowed to speak or move freely. Even the slightest noise could result in brutal beatings. The food given to prisoners in the tiger cage was another form of mental torture. They received meager, nutritionally poor rations, usually dried bread and stale water, just enough to keep them alive but insufficient to give them strength to resist. Many suffered from malnutrition, their bodies weakening and spirits breaking down. What made Brushy Mountain notorious was its tightly controlled and secretive tiger cage system. The iron cages were located deep in the basement, with no sunlight and no way to communicate with the outside world. Prisoners could only stare at the cold walls in front of them and hear echoes from other inmates through tiny gaps. Many inmates locked inside the tiger cage experienced psychological breakdowns. Some lost their minds, others even committed suicide, but the guards seemed indifferent to this. They believed cruelty bred fear and order, and they would do anything to maintain absolute control. One horrifying story involved a prisoner named James, who spent over a year in the tiger cage. According to fellow inmates, James once screamed wildly in the dead of night, begging for help no one could hear. When the guards finally opened the cage to check, they found a man emaciated. Trembling, barely conscious, James was later transferred out, but the tale of his desperate cries haunted the others. Not only did it serve as a prison, but the tiger cage at Brushy Mountain was also a place where psychological and physical torture were systematically inflicted. Some of the guards, notorious for their cruelty, devised extremely harsh punishments. For example, the silent storm, a form of torture where inmates were completely isolated, forbidden from speaking or seeing light for days on end. One of the most horrifying aspects was the agonizing moans echoing through the chained rooms, where prisoners endured both physical pain and mental anguish. Stories passed down reveal inmates beaten to the point of broken bones, confined in suffocating conditions, left only to pray in the darkness, yet not everyone succumbed. Some inmates maintained their clarity and hope in their souls. They found ways to connect through subtle signals or fleeting glances through the tiger cage's small gaps. They held on to the belief that one day, light would shine into this darkness. One memorable story tells of a group of prisoners who planned an escape. They exploited every weakness in the system. Moments when guards were careless, exchanging coded messages by tapping on cage doors, though the plan never fully succeeded. This resilience and will to survive inspired generations of inmates after them. Brushy Mountain Penitentiary was not just a prison for the most dangerous criminals of the 20th century, it became a symbol of the uncompromising cruelty of an outdated penal system. Stories of the tiger cage at Brushy Mountain continue to be told, not only to remind us of a painful past, but also to serve as a warning to today's generation about the value of human rights and freedom. As the sun dipped behind the Appalachian Mountains, darkness draped over Brushy Mountain like an eternal shroud. Inside those cold stone walls, the screams echoed like something straight from hell. Not everyone could endure that sound. It was the kind of noise that made your skin crawl, like the air itself was weeping. Inmates here weren't just imprisoned, they were buried alive in fear. Brushy Mountain wasn't a prison, it was a life sentence for the soul. Every footstep through those stone corridors whispered, "You are no longer human." Imagine being locked in a damp room, no light, no bed, no toilet, only a plastic bucket for everything. And you're left there for 3 straight years, with no sunlight, no voice to hear. That was the tiger cage, a name the guards used casually, but prisoners called it the mental slaughterhouse. And it wasn't just the silence that killed you. It was how that silence seeped into your thoughts, how it made you forget who you were. Many inmates began talking to themselves, replying to their own voices, until even that voice faded, leaving only the wheezing chuckle of a broken man. There was a tale whispered among inmates like a warning about prisoner 882, real name Elijah Monroe. He was once a notorious hitman. But what made people shudder wasn't the blood on his hands, it was how Brushy Mountain devoured him. Elijah was locked in the tiger cage for 17 months, no light, no voices, no sound except the drip-drip of water onto wet concrete. Every day, a guard shoved him a food tray like feeding an animal. After 10 months, he stopped speaking. After 14, he began eating his own flesh, fingernails, skin, even part of his tongue. And in month 17, when they opened the cage, Elijah was gone, not dead, just vanished. What remained was a blood-soaked drawing on the wall, a giant eye staring back at whoever dared to look. Brushy didn't kill you with bullets. It killed you with your own mind. Some people ask, why has no one ever escaped this place? The answer isn't the barbed wire or the rifles. It's because beyond the prison wall lies the Appalachian wilderness, where there are no roads, no lights, just bears, snakes, fog, and cliffs. In 1977, one inmate actually escaped. He crawled through the fence, scaled the stone wall, and ran blindly into the woods. But 3 days later, He knocked on the prison gate, begging to come back in. Because he said, "What's out there is worse." Brushy Mountain wasn't just a place to hold criminals. It was a place where humanity was drowned. And though it officially closed in 2009, those who survived it say they still hear whispers in their dreams, see those stone walls in the dark, and feel its breath when the night falls. It wasn't a prison, it was a gate to hell. After more than a century in operation, Brushy Mountain became a symbol of brutality and horror. Its cold stone walls imprisoned not just bodies, but also the souls of those confined within. One of the most notable events was the 1977 escape of James Earl Ray, the assassin of Martin Luther King Jr., along with 6 other inmates, climbed over the fence and fled into the treacherous mountains. However, after only 58 hours, they were recaptured about 8 miles from the prison. This incident led to heightened security measures at Brushy Mountain. Brushy Mountain also witnessed bloody riots. In 1982, a riot erupted when 7 white inmates, armed with weapons, attacked black inmates, resulting in 2 deaths and 2 injuries. This riot raised concerns about racial tensions and security within the prison. After its closure in 2009, Brushy Mountain didn't remain silent. Many believe the prison is haunted by restless spirits. Paranormal tours are conducted, and participants have reported eerie experiences. Footsteps in empty corridors, whispers in the dark, and the feeling of being watched. Brushy Mountain is not just a prison, it's a place filled with terrifying stories, restless spirits, and a testament to the dark side of the criminal justice system.